Hello, I'm RTX, and here is my Let's Play world, and here it is again with ray tracing turned on. Now here it is one more time with Minecraft's newest beta feature, Deferred Rendering. These two options cannot stack together, and so it becomes immediately clear that Minecraft built shader-style technology into Minecraft and is now building a competing product against themselves. The only question is why, as well as what the heck is the difference. Today I'll explain the difference between the two while showing you around my world with Deferred Rendering turned on, before finally doing some side-by-side of Deferred Rendering versus RTX. But first, what are those two things? According to Microsoft's own documentation, Minecraft supports a physically based rendering pipeline that can be used for deferred lighting and ray tracing. This involves accurately modeling surface details as well as scene illuminators to achieve a lighting model that is coherent across all times of day. By taking advantage of PBR and the new deferred lighting pipeline, you unlock new creative control over the mood and lighting conditions of your entire scene. They also include a whole lot of documentation about how precisely to implement it, as well as the various models for daylight cycle and the horizon bloom that we don't need to dive deep into today, to instead explain that they are both forms of physically based rendering, obviously. However, they work differently and cannot be used in conjunction because they are very different techniques. And to explain as simply as I can find it, deferred lighting is when you render out your game with color and geometry first and then do lighting later. In other words, deferring the rendering of your lighting. This is the benefit of allowing the light to accurately reflect your geometry, but as all-terrain data has to be stored in a buffer before being rendered, it is computationally expensive. Ray tracing, on the other hand, is a rendering technique that can realistically simulate the lighting of a scene and its objects by rendering physically accurate reflections, refractions, shadows, and indirect lighting. For every point on a visible surface, we shoot one ray directed towards the light, is a fun explanation for dummies I found. This requires shooting millions of rays of light, but creates very accurate light at the cost of being computationally expensive. You might have noticed both options are computationally expensive, which means that it requires a more powerful graphics card with more video memory, which is why neither are in default Minecraft yet, and why neither were coded into Minecraft to begin with, and it's unlikely to be in there until the average phone is as powerful as a mid to high-end PC today, or until it is greatly optimized, which is a part of the point of putting this behind creative features, and a part of the point behind this only being available in betas and previews, specifically with this toggle turned on, and then also specifically with a pack downloaded. The other part is a little more insidious and also explains why they switched from one to the other, but first I think it's more fair to do a side-by-side because we can talk about the difference in how they render the lights all we like, but let's talk about, and more importantly, show off the difference between these two types of physical-based rendering by actually showing them in a side-by-side situation of the exact same world, everyone's favorite in fact, and because they are both only available behind resource packs, I'm going to be using Kelly's RTX for RTX. This is the standard vanilla ray tracing pack, and then we'll be using Smokestack's Deferred Rendering. Both of these packs are trying to be as vanilla as possible, but they had to make some decisions about how much ray tracing or deferred rendering to implement, and so keep that in mind as we do the comparison. Hello, and welcome to my world, except with ray tracing turned on. As you can see, things are beautiful with all of this extra lighting going into the game. You can see there are actual natural shadows coming from the sun as it hits things over the skyline and creates this real difference in light, which makes Minecraft feel a lot more realistic. RTX was incredibly popular when it first came out, and it's very interesting because even before we talk about any of the actual lighting effects and issues that it has, it's worth mentioning that as you load it up, RTX is slightly slower to load on a world. It has slightly fewer options to customize, and indeed right now you can't customize anything because the ray tracing button doesn't work fully seemingly, and finally it has the third biggest disadvantage of being much slower once you do load up a world. On these same settings and same render distance, where I can see just past my big nether portal where I wasn't sure how much obsidian you needed to use, when you can see this exact world right here, going over to that distance, 20 chunks, starts to really push my particular graphics card, whereas the same world with the same nether portal of confusing dimensions with the exact same render distance works a little bit better in deferred rendering. This is my observation at the very least after playing around with my Let's Play world, which might be abnormal in some ways, but you can see this features most of the same features of shadows, which are accurately cast from where the sun is in the sky at a given point in time, even moving around second to second as the sun's position does too. Take a look at this shadow right here, and you'll notice how it's not just moving at a given point in time because it's a dynamic shadow, but also it is moving over time. It's a very subtle difference. I feel like you almost wouldn't have spotted if I didn't fast forward it just there, but yeah, as the sun is moving, obviously the things that it's casting a shadow on are also changing with it, and it leads to these very interesting, actually dynamic shadows. Both RTX and ray tracing. Don't cast the full player as a real, model that exists unless you're in third person. As you can see, I've just got my fist floating in the air or my gravel or whatever else, but it's still a very, very interesting way to look at the world. I would also say the bigger difference is that here in deferred rendering, we have slightly less light that is visible, although it's hard to say for sure how much of that is down to the pack itself versus the technology underneath, but it is still something that is very interesting to note. I feel like deferred rendering has a slightly more natural, or at the very least natural shader style look to it. Something which both packs falter from, but in different ways, seems to be artifacting. This is one of the biggest problems that you don't really see in other games that use this technology, but you'll see, for example, if I look at this chest and move right and left, that the chest is kind of staying on the screen slightly longer than it should. This is extra noticeable if we switch back to RTX, with the flowers having this on a really, really bad level. Really pay attention to the left and right of the chest, and you'll notice how it's very, very hard not to see whether you know it's there or not. There is a big problem with graphics staying on screen a little bit longer than they should because the lighting clearly is taking a bit too long to pass. This is massively improved as we show you the same thing with deferred rendering, but still not as good as it perhaps could be. The same thing is also true when you break a block. Again, I would say this is about as noticeable in RTX or deferred rendering. When you're breaking the block, it is staying visible for a second, and then the blocks aren't moving very naturally. It seems the lighting is trying to apply to them too, and is either slowing them down or causing them to look unnatural in a way that I can't quite say is very canny. And also, this affects the player. When you rotate around in a world, you can see it looks kind of like this. This is an issue both packs have, where you don't look smooth and natural, but you instead look like a bunch of frames. This could be because of the way that lighting is calculated. Maybe it's not done every single frame for performance reasons, but it's something that's needed to have a high frame rate in Minecraft because this is one of the things that makes the game feel so smooth. Speaking of things that are smooth, let's quickly now transition into showing you around my enchanted forest or enchanted valley right next to my very first house I ever built. Beautiful cave house, don't criticize it. And yeah, we'll mention that right now we have deferred rendering on, and this is what it looks like, but we'll quickly switch back over to RTX. By the way, one of the fun things about RTX is how the light renders long before the world, leading you to a very interesting situation. Anyway, here is RTX. As you can see, there is a slight difference there in how different materials are showing off, but this is the textures, keep that in mind, not the pack itself. The important thing to note is how the sun and all the other sources of light are impacting the world, and yeah, with ray tracing, I feel like the biggest complaint everyone has, and it's one I share in too, is that things are very, very overlit. This cave has so many differently lit pixels that it doesn't even look like it's different lighting, it just looks like it's a deliberately extra 3D texture, even though you can see that it's clearly not. It's a little jarring and feels a bit too much like it is trying to be realistic without understanding what realism is. And to show you another great example, let's go somewhere where it's actually dark. And so yeah, this is an interesting thing that both packs handle, because light is one thing to do well. Making light pretty is hard. It doesn't just mean making it the very brightest thing on screen at all times, because this lava is nice and all, but it might be nicer if it was betterly contrasted with the environments. But let me show you a big fake mountain that I made right here, because this is a very natural shadow from the rest of the world. This is a lit place, at least for a little bit longer, and going inside should slowly see us approach darkness. How does this actually look in the world? Well, ignoring the end rods are incredibly bright in this pack, seemingly breaking my entire point, you can see that as we go into the cave, darkness approaches really, really quickly, and it gets it's very soon before we realize that, yeah, we basically don't see things unless there is a perfect light on us. If we break one of these and we're in the dark, you can see that it's not just a little bit dark, it feels way darker than regular Minecraft. In fact, to prove it's not feeling, here is me turning RTX off. This is regular Minecraft. You can see things pretty well, pretty clearly. The difference between light over there and dark over here is much, much different once we turn this on. Also, for some reason, both RTX and deferred rendering don't have the crossbow render in first person. I've yet to work out why this is, but it's a very strange thing. Seemingly, there is a similar technology going on between light and darkness and how it's rendering blocks, but it doesn't seem to handle things correctly all of the time. With deferred rendering, you'll notice that the exact same walk has a very slightly different vibe to it. There is still a lot of light in here, but because it's sunsetting, it actually feels a little bit more natural. I would still say it's much lighter than real life is at this time, but our regular lights that we place down here, or torches I guess we should call them, have very much a real source of light to them as well, adding multiple sources of vibe. Indeed, look at my same torch in a cave right here, and you'll see that things things are a bit smoother and a bit more natural. The exact same effect is applying to each individual block, where if you look too closely, it looks like a fake form of 3D where some parts are outlined and inlined differently, but you can see that this does lead to different materials feeling very different and also reacting to light in a different way, except this time it doesn't feel too intentional and fake. It feels almost like what you would want to see. In my opinion, it's not realistic or anything. I mean, this is a block-based game with, cows that look the way they do, but instead I want to say that this is something that looks actually pretty decent. The artifacting, I think, is much worse at night. That is one of the weird issues I've noticed with deferred rendering, but otherwise, if I show you a transition between light out here and bright in there. By the way, look at this. The lava is so much dimmer just for not having as many bright things on screen, but you'll see that, like, okay, these end rods are just ridiculous. The RTX version was insane already, but at this point, it looks like I'm going into an airport runway or something with it's just so ridiculously lit up in here. I don't know why it's meant to look like this, but this does not look dark at all. Maybe it's an unfair example. Maybe I shouldn't have used end rods to build this whole thing, but you can see as we transition from light to dark, it's a bit more natural feeling, or at least a bit more Minecraft feeling. We have torches in the cave over there, and you can see very clearly as a result, and we don't have anything over here, so we can't see very clear as a result, and as we break light, you can see that gets extra clear. Having a light placed down also slowly starts to filter out. It's one of the interesting characteristics of it, that means that although it's basically the exact same effect as when you do it in regular Minecraft, it happens in a way that just feels a little bit nicer and a bit more like you're actually turning on a light, at least in my opinion. Yeah, this is regular Minecraft. This is deferred rendering, although it takes a moment for everything to kick on. It's a big difference in my opinion, but ultimately, it to me feels like it's not an entire rewriting. It's the same exact set of features and the same engine as Minecraft themselves have said, just slightly better written with slightly better outcomes. What does a creeper look like with deferred rendering? The answer is honestly surprisingly similar. But yeah, you see that it's much closer to vanilla Minecraft, or at least your expectations of vanilla Minecraft, just with a few extra issues that come from the way that both lighting systems are being built into the game, and I just don't like looking at the dirt blocks spinning it that way. This doesn't look natural. This isn't this isn't how blocks spin, and I'm not saying that blocks do spin in the real world, but if they did, they wouldn't do it at 20 frames a second. Well, it's not bad that people who are creating things should get paid for what they do. This is something we should all agree on. However, it does feel like the Bedrock version of anything is to take something that is very popular in Java and work out how it is justifiable to eventually charge for the same thing on Bedrock. But maybe that's just what you should expect when it comes to a company like this, and maybe that is the price we pay for continual development. I would say, though, the fair exchange on our end of that bargain is, if you're going to keep on working out new ways to monetize this game, you know, the community deserves things back in exchange too. I think that is something that Microsoft should be upping when it comes to development, rather than keeping neutral and focusing on these other things. But that's my personal take. For now, though, that has been this video about deferred rendering. I hope it's been informative. I hope you've learned some things, and if you have, please do consider subscribing to the channel. It is something that helps out a lot, and yeah, I hope you've been enjoying these newer style of videos. It takes a lot more time to put together all the fun bits we mix in here, but I've really been enjoying making them, so thank you for all the kind words. You're encouraging me to do more, as we might do tomorrow. But for now, thank you for watching. I'll be playing with deferred rendering some more, so check out my live streams if you want to see this in real live action, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Yeah, there's a playlist called Unlisted Live Streams. You know, no, I'm going to stop my outro and say, Unlisted Live Streams, the place to find out when the next live stream is happening, and where you can see me play with some beautiful graphics if you're enthralled like I am and want to see more. Because every time I play, I'm like, oh, this is pretty. Something about graphics changes Minecraft, and it doesn't make any sense. Why would the graphics make a big difference on the beautiful game we all know and love? But somehow it does, and because it does, come check it out. Okay, that's my pitch. Goodbye.